Hello and welcome back to the Start a Glamping Business podcast, where we interview guest experts about their experience starting glamping sites, or just to hear their views on the glamping industry and how it can help you with your sites. Today we are speaking to Kevin and Izaac Rains, who are a father and son duo who own Dappled Adventures in Kentucky. They've been taking bookings on their site since April 2021, and it's been going well so far from what they say. And they've certainly learned a lot in the process of both setting up and running their site, and that's what we're going to try and dig into today, as well as some specific aspects of their history that also lends itself to the way they do business and the way that they look after their guests. So that will all be revealed a little bit later on. But just before we start, guys, I'd like you to introduce yourselves, your backstory, and how you got into the glamping business.
Sure, I can go first. So Kevin Rains, I started my career actually in the ministry. I was a pastor of a local church for a number of years. And then one of the things that we were trying to do while we were in that church was my family was having a hard time getting outside the city and having that kind of natural recreative time. So we invested in 50 acres about 17 years ago in the middle of Kentucky, so a small state in the kind of what we call the Midwest of the U.S. And it was just 50 blank acres. It was just an open canvas, had a small driveway. Time went on. I got it back into the family business of auto body repair. Late 21, I sold all my body shops. I had 5 at the time, and that allowed us to invest more deeply into this property that we had in central Kentucky. It had kind of gone dormant. We used it while our kids were growing up. And over time, we just kind of drifted away from utilizing it. And then Izaac and I were looking to partner on a business after I got out of the body shop. So we started kind of thinking about how we might be able to utilize those 50 acres for short-term rentals, started leaning into the glamping side. And here we are. We have 7 structures on the property, 5 canvas tent glamp sites that are elevated in the canopy, a cabin, and a bunkhouse, which is turning into a clubhouse now. We're going to make that more of a common space. So that's kind of the short version of how we got from point A to point B.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to that, but my name is Izaac. I kind of have a background in video production and lots of customer service background, which translates well to this industry. I feel like he kind of covered it, but our family has been glamping since before we really even had the words to describe what glamping is, starting out camping and then moving into a pop-up camper on that property in Kentucky, the property that we still own, and from there into a yurt on that same property, which then turned into our cabin and gave us kind of a nice foundation for setting up what a glamping experience can be for all of our guests now and in the future. Yeah, we love it. We love it.
That's great. And this is a segment that we want to sort of make a regular one with our guests who are, have set up their own glamping sites and have got their own unique experiences from that. So guys, how much did it cost for you roughly to start your glamping business, and how was that money allocated?
Wow, I think we've probably invested about almost $400,000 in the last 6 to 8 months. So for us, that was primarily pulling the utilities onto the property. As Izaac said, we were doing a lot of off-grid structures. The yurt was off-grid, the camper was off-grid, the cabin was off-grid for that whole time. And then we decided to pull utilities on. And because I had sold my businesses, I had a bit of money that I could reinvest into this property. So I think the bulk of that cost was probably put towards just getting electricity, water, septic. So we now have 5 flush toilets and 3 showers. We have a bathhouse that we designed and developed back by the glamp sites. And we're completely on grid for our cabin. And then we're going to kind of put the different structures at different stages of being on grid. So the tents don't have a bathroom inside of them, but there is that bathhouse available as an example of that. So the bulk of that money really went into the utilities. And then I would say it was probably, and Izaac, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, about 25 to 30,000 per glamp site. That was about a $5,000 tent, but it was put on top of a very sturdy deck. So we used 6x6s. We built the foundation as if we were going to eventually put a cabin on top of each one of those. so we can eventually move the tents to another area and put more permanent structures on those decks. So that was a lot of the cost was tied up in that. So I'd say kind of planning on anywhere from, if you just want to throw a tent on the ground, it could be $1,000 with a tarp under it, all the way up to, 50,000 if you want to have full amenities inside of the structure. We kind of landed right in the middle there at 25,000 per site.
And for those who are interested in potentially setting up an off-grid glamping site, like how did the mechanics of that work for you? Like what were the toilet and potentially shower arrangements whilst you were an off-grid site?
Izaac, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So while we were off-grid, what we call luxury off-grid, we offer porta potties for our guests. So porta potties that are maintained well, regularly cleaned every week in between guests to make sure that they're sparkling for everybody. And then we also have some outdoor showers set up that guests can use until we have fully functioning instant hot water showers. So especially right now in the summertime, the outdoor shower seems like a really good way for folks to get clean, but also just to cool down, wash off, and rinse the sweat and stickiness off your body at the end of a hot day.
It's a nice reset. I've experienced it myself.
Yes.
And now moving away from the practical side of things into more discussing like your guiding philosophies, I suppose. Now, you lived in something called an intentional community for a little while, I believe. And what I wanted to dig into today is, well, first of all, just for the benefit of the audience, explain what exactly an intentional community is, because I didn't know when you told me about it. Maybe that's just me being dumb. Secondly, your specific intentional community and just how it was set up and the experience it gave you. And then thirdly, which we'll move on to after you've done that, is like how that has affected how you've run your business and the principles that you've applied from that. But just to start with, like, what is an intentional community and what kind of community did you grow up in as part of that?
So I'd love for Izaac to share his perspective on this, and I'll just kind of open us up. But because he grew up from the time he was born until the time he was graduated from high school, he lived in that intentional community. So intentional community, the way we're using the term is it was related to the church that I was pastoring. We had several of the younger people, like a lot of single people, would live with us in our home. It was a chance for my wife and I to mentor them and also create kind of a rhythm of life where we could do the ministry together. We would share meals together, share times of prayer around the table together. So it's kind of what we were going for was a very integrated life between what we did for work, what we did with our free time, what we did for our ministry, what we did. It was all kind of trying to be integrated into one thing, one whole. So we lived in a house that had actually 10 bedrooms and 5 full bathrooms. So we would quote unquote rent out rooms to different people from our church community. And it was a way for us to kind of fund the ministry work we were doing in the city, as well as be an opportunity, like I said, to mentor those folks. One of the things that was a very high value for us during that whole time was hospitality. And I think that's the bridge that kind of bridges us into the hospitality industry. Was we've been trying to practice that as a family and one of our core family values for at least 25 years now. As long as Izaac's been alive, that's been a stated core value for our family. So we were consistently welcoming not just people to live with us, but we'd have people around our table every night. We rarely had less than 10 to 12 people around our table for dinner every night. In some ways, it seems odd and unusual. In other ways, it harkens back to previous eras of history when multiple generations would be together, or employees would actually share meals with their employers. So it was more of this, again, integrated experience between just the whole of life. So that's kind of, again, the basis. It was a 24-year experience for my wife and I and our kids. We raised all of our children in that setting. So it was very meaningful. At times it was very difficult, but the open door was kind of that's the bridge between that season of our life and then what we're trying to accomplish now by offering this other piece of property in Kentucky to more people.
Yeah, and just before we connect to that stage, I'd like to get Izaac whether you've got anything to add on that and how it was for you, with a view to potentially saying how you applied those principles with your glamping business.
Yeah, thank you. It's really, really interesting and odd way to spend the first 17, 18 years of your life. I really liked it, but I think throughout the course of my childhood, we probably had close to 100 people come through our house, living there, visiting, staying with us. And what it did for me in relation to the business and as a person, I think was really show me what a community could be, not just an intentional community, but that idea of different people coming together and forming this thing that we call a community, and what benefits that kind of experience can bring to people's lives. So it translated into our business in a really cool way, I think, because unlike some of our other competitors or people who might be getting into this space currently, I think we are seeing all of our separate structures not completely as fully separate structures, but pieces of one large thing. And we try to be very intentional about how we set up all of the stays on our site to where folks can rent them out in blocks and, get 3 tents at a time, 4 tents at a time, 5 tents at a time, and really create their own small intentional community for the weekend or week or whatever, and connect with each other in that way.
Yeah, and the love you developed for hospitality and bringing people together throughout those years, that must be replicated in your glamping site, because I speak to so many site owners who say the money can be good, yes, but the biggest joy they get as glamping site owners is being able to bring people together and create special experiences for families or couples, whoever it may be. Now that must be nice to continue that feeling that you had from that community onto towards this business that must give you so much joy like that.
And it does. There's nothing that brings me more joy than seeing families coming together, friends coming together on this property, and having these experiences that harken back to the experiences that we had on that same property and in our home in Cincinnati when we lived there. So yeah, it's incredible.
Do you want to maybe share a little bit about Glamp Island and explain what that is and how that's one of our kind of very practical ways to create community?
Yeah, that's a great point. So in the middle of all of our glamping tents, one of the ways that we try to foster that community, that communal feeling, is having common areas for people. And in the center of all 5 glamping tents that we currently have on the property, we have this little area that we've called Glamp Island. And what that is a small patch of forested area in the middle of all these tents that actually has a netted playground built on it. So currently it has 2 nets on it, but it's set up to where we're going to keep adding more nets in this small patch of forest in the canopy between these trees. And the idea is that there is basically a massive hammock, trampoline, stargazing net type thing that sits between these trees where folks can go and jump with their kids or lay in it and just look up at the sky, the trees, or eventually climb up through all these different tiers in the canopy and just experience different views of the forest from these nets.
Yeah, that's something that, like, when I spoke to you about this a few weeks ago for a different conversation, like I hadn't heard anything like that, and I've interviewed a lot of glamping site owners in both the UK and the US and Canada, and done a lot of research on glamping sites, and I haven't seen anything like it, and it's great. So hopefully we can get some pictures, like as you were speaking about that. Hopefully my editing skills allow me to put some pictures of that up, but don't count on it because I've got the editing skills of a 3-year-old, but I'll try. So yeah, and in a similar vein to something that you use that sort of creates a sense of community, this is slightly different, but also something that brings value to your proposition, but also adds value to the people that follow your glamping site on social media, for example, is you do these, you've got a little marketing tactic called a mini retreat. And I'd just like you to just talk about that a little bit, because again, it's something that I hadn't come across despite speaking to lots and lots of glamping site owners across the world. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about that. And Kevin, I think it was your idea, wasn't it?
It was my idea, and it came while I was actually leading a retreat. And I thought, how can we scale this retreat to hundreds of people? Because it's such an incredible experience to be on retreat, seeing nature, being with people you care about. And just the thought hit me of doing like a mini retreat, and I pitched it to Izaac. So he gets 90% of the credit because he's enacted this. So I'd love for him to share a little bit about what a mini retreat is.
Yeah, so mini retreats were, as he said, an idea that he came up with that was basically a way to get people out to a retreat without having to leave the immediate spot that they were in. So there's this concept that other people call, and that I like to call, doom scrolling. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's where you're kind of locked to your phone, just scrolling, reading about all the horrible things that are happening, and all the struggles that people are dealing with in the world right now. And our goal is just as a whole to get people away from that. So to give people a break, rest, rejuvenation from the weight of the world. So mini retreats were a way that we try and accomplish that for people. What they are is 15 to 30 seconds of video of something on our property. Usually it's nature. So my favorite is actually a video that looks out into the valley from our opposite cliff edge. It's 200-foot view into this valley where you can just see for miles. And it's 30 seconds of just the trees doing their thing, just swaying back and forth, enjoying the sunlight, enjoying their day. And what we tell people is to stop doom scrolling just for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever you can give us. And as you watch this video, just take a deep breath in and out. And then you can continue on your journey. But our hope is that those 10 to 30 seconds really help revitalize people and pull them out of that social media doom scrolling kind of slump.
Yeah, that's great. We'll hopefully share some of those on our Instagram feed in time as well. And obviously, what you said there, that brings value to people's lives, but also it can be a good marketing tactic just because it's so unique and it shows off your property in a completely different way to what most people are used to. And you also told me about another marketing technique that is kind of old school, really, thinking about it, but it's had a big effect for you, and it's something that prospective glamping site owners might want to employ themselves when they start their glamping businesses. And you use press releases just when you started and opened your site, and even though it's not fancy, it's quite old school, it had a big effect on your occupancy rate from day one, right?
Yes. So this is something that admittedly, I wouldn't have thought to do if I wasn't married to Katie, my lovely wife, who is professional in the marketing world and PR world. So because of that, I also think it's something that a lot of glamping business owners might not think to do, because from what I understand, a lot of folks getting into this industry are self-made. A lot of folks don't have backgrounds in marketing or business, that type of thing. So press releases have been huge for us. And you can find templates for them online, breakdowns of the proper ways to write everything and format everything. But it's just a really simple, one-page way to get people interested in what you're doing. So what I would do was I wrote up a press release, and I literally sent it to as many magazines, newspapers, websites, publications in our area as I could find. And, most of them we didn't get a response back from, but 5 or 6 of them took our press release and ran with it, wrote up articles for us, about us, shared our photos, shared our website. And it's just been huge for us. It's kind of hard to believe, but the newspaper industry, the news industry apparently is still going strong, because we got a good amount of business from just taking the time to write that one-page press release and send it out via email.
Yeah, so that's a lesson for prospective site owners: is do not discount the old media. You don't have to focus on Instagram and Facebook all the time. And then just finally, and again, this is another regular segment we want to introduce before we ask, how people can book a stay at your site. I've asked you this before, sort of off camera. I'm going to ask you again on camera, both. Are you happy with your decision to start a glamping business?
I am, for sure. The investment that I thought it was going to take was way more in terms of time and effort, as well as finances. But I don't have any regrets whatsoever. It seems like, from an investment standpoint, the cash on cash return is unbelievably high. It's way better of an investment, from what I can tell, in terms of like cash on cash return, than like traditional real estate. So I kind of looked at different types of real estate before we made this move. And it shocked me how disproportionate short-term rentals, and then even beyond that thinner slice of glamping within short-term rentals, the returns are almost immediate and very satisfying. So we've been pleased from a financial standpoint all the way through. And then secondly, just again, sharing our values of hospitality. And to circle back for just a second to those nets, the nets actually represent two more big values for us. One is giving people a space to rest, which the nets are great places to sleep. There'll be climbers that will sleep in those during the fall and spring months. So they'll just rent the net basically and put their sleeping bag on it. So it's a great place to rest that way. Also a great place to take naps or stargaze. And then another value we have is to create rejuvenating experiences outside. And rejuvenation means to be made young again. That's the Latin meaning of that term. So for us, it's like to be playing on a net in the canopy with friends or with your kids or grandkids. Just how amazing that can be to be very playful. So I feel like the nets are another expression of our value of rest and rejuvenation. And then, of course, the long-term goal we have, which is to kind of express the value of hospitality. And it's pretty obvious how that one connects.
Izaac?
Yes, I am so happy that we made this decision, that we took the jump and just started trying to figure this out. It's been a huge learning experience for me as a first-time business owner and operator, and it's been a lot of work. That's definitely something for people to consider, but the benefits are unbelievable. And the fact that I get to see so many families, couples, and individuals happy in these experiences that we've created has just been fantastic.
Fantastic. And if people want to book a stay with you, how can they find you?
So they can find us at dappledlightadventures.com. They can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Dappled Light Adventures, as well as TikTok. And all of our listings are also on Airbnb if you search in the Red River Gorge, Kentucky, and Slade, Kentucky areas.
Fantastic. Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you as ever. And we'll put your links to your site and social medias in the description of this episode. But thanks again for giving up your time.
Awesome.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much, Nick. We really appreciate it.